Well, people should be given an opportunity to know what the data is, what the fundamentals are. We don't do that in Canada. And the biggest problem we have, although I've called for it many times in my previous career, was to have a set of numbers that we can rely on. The Americans provide it weekly. We don't. And that creates opportunities, obviously, for me, but not for others.
Okay, I think we are live across our Facebook feeds. We have CBC News Facebook page, we have On the Money, Marketplace, Nova Scotia, PEI, Ottawa, Edmonton, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and Calgary. So, oh my goodness, there are so many of you hopefully watching this. I want you to send us your questions today. We are talking about gas prices across the country and why we're seeing gas prices at the heights that we are. So we are nearing this sort of 2014 level. So we brought in Dan McTeague, who is with GasBuddy.com. And Dan, you watch gas prices very closely in Canada and the US.
Correct.
But what are we seeing this year that seems to be different than, say, last year?
Yeah, well, Jackie, the big one is oil. It's up, if you look at the two types of oil that we use in Canada, one is West Texas Intermediate, WTI. That's up about $22 a barrel. When we look at Brent, which is used further on the east coast of Canada, you're looking at $27. So this time last year, Brent oil, $50 a barrel.
Yeah.
Now 78, 79. Now it might change during the day. West Texas Intermediate, 47 last year, now 70, 71. So that has a lot to do with why prices are as high as they are. There are, of course, other factors, including HSTs, GSTs, and other taxes.
And when you're a consumer and you're at the pump and you're just seeing these numbers tick up higher and higher in BC, there's some cities there over $1.70 a liter, which is hard to swallow from a consumer's perspective. But it's hard to make that connection between perhaps that we're seeing fewer exports out of Venezuela. Easy for me to say. We're seeing fewer exports out of there for oil, and yet we're feeling higher gas prices here.
Yeah, I mean it's a double whammy for drivers, but not just drivers, because this is going to extend itself throughout the entire economy. Planes, trains, automobiles. In Vancouver, you're looking at $1.60.9. Those are the highest prices that we've ever seen. We broke through the record a month ago. There's issues of chronic shortages of refined product into that region. Western Canada, we've seen some refineries shut down for a period of time for maintenance. That's driven prices up. In Eastern Canada, the same phenomenon. But it doesn't matter where you are, all of us are now paying about 25 cents a litre more than last year. And what that really works out to, Jackie, is an increase for most of us using 40, maybe 50 litres a week of about $400 to $600 a year. And that's a minimum. You can imagine for those who use it a lot more, who have to get to and fro, same with diesel and other products, it's going to be a very expensive 2018.
I am curious to hear what some of our viewers are doing, if they're changing their behaviors because of higher gas prices. Let us know what you've done. It might be that they're biking more, that they're, that sort of thing. Or are you thinking even bigger picture that perhaps your vehicle is too much of a gas guzzler? Send us your comments, because I really am curious to hear about that. We do have one coming in from Natasha Lesrostova, and Natasha says, there is no reason for this price when a barrel is half price from post-2008. So talking about oil being in 2008, and gas prices had spiked at the financial crisis that we were seeing then. Absolutely,
and Natasha makes a very good point. In fact, you and I were talking about it a little earlier. What we're seeing here is a couple of factors. In 2008, when oil hit $140 a barrel, and we saw $1.42, $1.44 in places like Toronto, a little bit less across the country, you also had a Canadian dollar that was trading on par or even stronger than the US greenback. So Natasha, you had at that time 98 cents Canadian would buy you $1 US. Today it's the other way around. It takes 129 pennies to buy $1 US, and because we price all of our fuel in US terms, that's the international benchmark for all commodities, you're losing 16 cents in value. Second factor, taxes. Every province has increased its taxes dramatically. My province here in Ontario, we've seen about a 18 cent a litre increase since then, a combination of both higher, going from a GST to an HST, and of course the carbon taxes, which in some provinces like Alberta, if I'm looking at their numbers very carefully, 7 cents for their carbon tax, the GST, and of course they added another 4 cents back in 2014. So all told, that's an increase of 11 cents in Alberta.
Because it is interesting when you look at the US prices, prices for gasoline are climbing there as well, but nowhere near as much as what we're seeing here.
That's right. The Americans don't have the HST GST factor, which compounds the increase. The blog
and
that
the
I put,
Canadian dollar factor.
And the Canadian dollar factor, of course. Yeah, they're buying it in their own dollars. A very good point, because so they're up 57 cents a gallon, works out to about 15 cents a liter. We're up 25. So that extra 10 cents, Canadian dollar, higher taxes.
So we're glad you're tuning in today across, I think, almost all of our Facebook pages, which is fantastic. We are talking about gas prices. We've seen quite a spike in recent months, since about March, really climbing higher. And we're hoping to get your questions, your comments as to what you're doing differently, but also any sort of questions you have as to why this is happening. We do have a comment from Dan Gold saying that he's cycling more in Saskatoon. Good on you, Dan. I hope you've got some nice weather like we
Warmer
have in
weather.
Toronto right now, which is great. Marshall Durrell says, I haven't bought gas in Canada in months. I go down to the States with jerry cans weekly. And that's something that we've actually looked at in some of our story coverage, particularly out of Vancouver because of the price spikes there, that consumers were saying that they were crossing over to the US to fill up there just to get a bit of a break, right. To make things a bit easier for them. And again, that sort of Canada-US difference, right?
Yeah, big time. I mean, if you're looking at Vancouver versus, say, Bellingham or Blaine, the difference can be 45, 50 cents a liter. You bring a vehicle, it's got 80 liters, and those jerry cans, you're going to save yourself $60. That's double the cost of a Nexus pass. So it makes it easier, especially given proximity.
Yeah. We have some other comments coming through too. I see Jeanette, Tara, Elena. We're going to try to get to all of you, so this is fantastic. Dale Arkand Moran, sorry about that. Dale asks, when's the best day of the week to fill up? Is there a best day of the week?
There is the actual best day of the week, and it depends on where you are. So Dale, I would say I gas up usually late in the evenings, and I definitely gas up on the weekends. That's because the big differences you see in many markets is the retail margin. That's about 10 to 12 cents a liter that the retailer is allowed to cover their costs, turning on the pumps, electricity, those types of things. So we tend to see on the weekends, retailers sort of look at this picture, they say they want more people into their stores to buy other products or keep market share. So they actually drop prices in many cases as much as 7 or 8 cents a liter. If in this kind of environment, I won't be gassing up anything, unless I really truly need it, unless I do it on Sundays.
On Sundays?
Correct.
Okay. Jeanette Brigitte says that she's getting healthy by walking more. Good choice. If you can do it, if you can cut back on driving, that's great, and also just great for you for walking. Tara Nestman writes, we are just not driving as much and only putting in gas for it to get us to that trip that day. So really trying to cut back on travel and just try to limit that budget. It's interesting because you wonder what the consumer reaction is in this, and some analysts have said that it is short term, that we see these price spikes happen, but that the consumer reaction can be maybe the first couple of months when we see prices go higher. But if we're potentially, you're forecasting that we might see higher gas prices until September.
Yeah, I mean, summer demand kicks in Canada this week with the May 2-4, or call it a little earlier, the Victoria Day weekend. Yep. And of course in the United States 1 week later with Memorial Day. Critical to understand, though, that whatever the demand or supply picture here is in Canada, it will have no effect on oil prices or domestic international prices for gasoline. Those are U.S. market determinants. And although we are conserving, I look around here, look at the vehicles. 10 years ago, most of the vehicles were 6 and 8 cylinders. Now they're 4, electric, hybrid, etc. So Canadians are, I think, very much more price sensitive. But there are non-discretionary events that take place where people can't really make that kind of quick adjustment. Interesting
to see the size of vehicles change, though. We're seeing record sales in the SUV and truck sector, and passenger cars really falling, though, as you're saying, the sort of fuel efficiency of those SUVs has
down.
Exactly, it has gotten better. Raised, let's see, MJ Phillips is commenting on your taxes comment, saying there are over 40 to 50 cents in taxes per liter, and that's sort of what you were speaking to there. Elena Periel says, why do gas prices always spike Tuesday mornings by over 15 cents a liter on the island of Montreal? My goodness, where outside of Montreal, still in Quebec, the fuel is at least 10 cents cheaper.
Yeah, well, there's gas bar shenanigans. First of all, Montreal has a higher tax jurisdiction than regions outside outside.
Okay.
And the Régie d'énergie there has zones, literal zones for pricing. So in Montreal, of course, your gas price when it popped yesterday to 147.9, of that amount, 54 cents is tax. So it's the highest tax jurisdiction anywhere in North America for fuel. So what happens is that gas stations from Thursday until Sunday drop their retail margins. That 12 cents I was talking about a little earlier, they compress it to zero. So that by Monday morning, when you should be buying, or Sunday night, you're down to $1.35. They will then raise the price up to meet and to restore those retail margins, and that's the only difference you see in Montreal. That up and down, it's the Montreal shuffle. And understand again, that's a perfect example of why buying on Sunday evenings in Montreal makes absolute sense. You're going to save a lot of money. 12 cents a liter is not chicken scratch when you consider my vehicle, a 4-cylinder Ford Escape. I run about 60 liters a week, so I'd be saving $7.50 a week on my fuel. And
is that something that you think the retailers would admit to doing? That
Sure. Well, I mean, the logic is there. If you go to the Gas Buddy website, just punch in the charts, you'll see Montreal's prices always spike on a Monday afternoon.
Okay, we are across our Facebook feeds and, pardon me, YouTube and Twitter as well. I didn't even say that off the top. So we have tons of viewers tuning into this, which is fantastic. And I really hope that you send your questions and your comments to us. We're talking about gas prices today. I'm curious what you're doing, if you're changing your habits, changing behaviors because of these higher gas prices we're seeing really right across the country. And Dan McTeague is here with us. He's with GasBuddy.com, watching gas prices across the country, across North America. So we've got lots more comments and questions coming in, which is fantastic. Jennifer King says, we just traded our truck for a small car. Sad, but it wasn't a decision we made lightly, which, I could see, a truck, you're going to be spending quite a bit if you're at the pump filling up. Fernanda and Emidio Hiber says she is changing the vehicle to a small size so we can afford to have a car. Again, changing the, that sort of almost life-changing, right? Because you're changing how you're getting to A to B, and if it's truck to car, that's quite a big change. If you're doing anything else, if you're any creative solutions that you've found to this, send them our way. James Makushil, I'm so sorry, James, if I pronounced that incorrectly. James says, I only drive when I need to. No Sunday drives, which means no shopping or spending when I'm out. That's interesting because kind of speaks to a ripple effect that this could have on the rest of the economy if people aren't out and exploring or aren't out shopping.
Well, yeah, I mean, it does mean that when you take, I give the example of the 40 liters, but let's say you're in a vehicle that has 80 liters. This year alone is going to cost you an extra $1,000 just in the increased cost. That's worth, a trip somewhere. That's worth, a couple of weeks, almost a month worth of groceries. There's a number of ways in which this situation, in terms of the high, dramatic increase in prices, is going to really have a chill on the public spending elsewhere. So if I look at StatsCan, which should come out today or tomorrow, pointing out that inflation is way up, this is going to start to ripple its way through the economy. And the example that's been given here is a good one, and I think it really reflects what I've been hearing from people saying we can't afford to do this, not the way we did before.
Also seeing from Afsena, Azarvash says that I'm not filling up in BC anymore. Again, one of these extreme places for gas prices. I'm going to Bellingham once a week.
There you go.
So that was another person sort of...
There's a lot of that, Jackie. A lot. And I'm telling you that it wouldn't surprise me to see 10-15% of motorists who are south of Vancouver driving down there. It makes
with that easy
sense.
access, Melissa White. Melissa says, sadly, I have had to cancel some extracurricular activities as the drives are lengthy. Until there is a break, as a single mom of 4, I cannot afford the gas to drive to work and then all over the city for the kids. And that makes perfect sense. If you're unable to, if the gas prices are so high, you have to really be efficient on those trips that you are making to get to where you need to go. It's unfortunate that it starts encroaching on that sort of extracurricular stuff. If anybody has any good ideas or solutions, send them to Melissa as well. Michael Lacrosse asks, why aren't we boycotting the big boys like Shell on Monday, Esso on Tuesday, Petro-Can on Wednesday, or big boycott the big boys and buy from Pioneer or Ultramar or other small gasoline retailers?
Well,
I don't know what
question.
sort of impact,
Well, they all buy from the same. In other words, you might be an Esso station, but there's a good chance you might be getting your refined product from Valero, which uses the trade name Ultramar. The relationship among refiners, we don't have one in every city anymore. We have three major dominant ones, Petro-Canada, Shell, and Esso, and you have regional ones. So in the Atlantic provinces, you've got Irving, you've got Valero, Ultramar in Quebec. In Ontario, have Suncor, which of course does own Petro-Canada. The reality here is that they all trade product. If I go to Oakville's Bronte plant, I'll see a truck picking up a delivery for a Shell station. I'll see another truck picking it up for a Petro-Can station. The reality is that most gas stations now receive fuel from one source. So boycotting one, really, it may feel good, but it's not going to have any impact whatsoever. And the wholesale price for gasoline is identical across Canada, every city. There's no competition on the refinery level. Again, the only competition you have is the last 12 cents on the liter of gasoline.
Right, okay. Thank you for sending in all of your questions and comments, and I still see more coming in from Kenneth, Tracy, George, Frankie, one off from YouTube, Tanya King. So let's try to get to everybody here. So Kenneth Sebald asks, so why do provinces like Saskatchewan and Alberta, who are the major contributors to the fuel economy, why are they paying the same or more than other provinces who have to have fuel shipped?
Well, it looks like in those kind of circumstances right now, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta are all looking at slightly higher prices by at least 5 cents a litre on the wholesale side. 2 of the 3 refineries in Edmonton are down for springtime maintenance. That's created a bit of a crimp in supply and a bump up in prices. I'm starting to see that going down. So whatever the high price is in every one of those towns, so let's say $1.26 in Regina, let's say you happen to be $1.27 in Calgary, the cost for most of those gas stations will be about $1.19 to $1.20 to buy their fuel. Look for that to drop to $1.16 over the next week or so. It looks like they're coming back online. So you'll start to see prices tilt down. But remember, our gas prices in this country are based on 3 markets in the United States. British Columbia, Pacific Northwest market out of Oregon. The second market is the Prairies market, based on Chicago spot market, and Toronto all the way out to Ontario all the way out to the Maritimes is based on the New York Harbor price for gasoline. That's where we get our prices from, and that's why it explains some of the big differences. But you're not going to get near Vancouver. It's still $1.60, and no one's going to beat that anytime soon.
We are talking about gas prices as so many Canadians do, I think, on a probably weekly, daily basis, especially when prices spike like this. And we haven't seen it at this sort of height since 2014. I should acknowledge there is a very large truck beside us right now that is probably using quite a bit of fuel, but it's a bit loud. So in case you hear that happening, we're just shuffling around a little bit. But send us your questions. I know we're across Facebook, YouTube, all sorts of pages. So let's go to Tracy Drexler. And Tracy says, we were going to drive to Calgary in July, canceled that trip due to the gas prices. So interesting to think about this time of year when the demand might be going up for gas prices because of things like road trips, because people want to get out and explore, and people might be, like Tracy, changing their plans.
Yeah, the staycation is back.
Yeah.
Well, while we're concerned about gas prices rising, we also have to be concerned about food prices rising as a consequence of farmers having to dig deeper to pay for higher priced diesel.
Sure.
The cost of transportation and getting those goods to the grocery store.
Yeah.
Everything across the economy is going to start to be impacted. So I think staycations are going to become the norm, not the exception.
George Jenkinson asks, how much of our oil and gas is used here in Canada, and can't we produce enough for our country? But it's not so much about the oil that we're producing here, it's more about the refining capacity, is that right?
Pipelines.
And pipelines.
I mean, we do have pipelines that take Alberta oil all the way to Toronto and even to Montreal. Anything east of that, you're dependent on foreign outcomes. We didn't get the Energy East pipeline built. It was blocked by protesters and environmental activists, and the Government of Canada changed its position on trying to redefine the work of the NEB, so that's gone. As far as the West Coast is concerned, you do have oil coming from Alberta into the Vancouver market on a constrained pipeline, only 300,000 barrels a day. combined with gasoline, diesel, and oil, it's just not enough.
I hope that you can hear us. We don't want to interrupt the work of the truck beside us. It is quite loud. Oh, now we've got some peace and quiet.
Finishes shredding.
Bear with us through those moments if you must. Frankie Desjardins comments: hard to limit travel when you live in rural Alberta. What about the farmers who have to pay to plant their crops? And exactly what you're speaking to.
I mean, and the reality here is that those prices have gone up dramatically. Compounding those is in fact government taxes. I say that only because in my previous job as a parliamentarian, I was successful in getting 2 rebates to Canadians, not just for Canadians out west, but also earlier we talked. We had a Facebook post from a mother of 4. $125 or $150. The federal and provincial government's coffers are rising dramatically with these higher prices. My sense is that they should be giving that back one way or another to Canadians, not necessarily the pumps, but some way in order to offset the pain.
There's a YouTube viewer that's asking again about oil prices, and we touched on this, but how do you justify high prices for gas compared to when oil was, 100 plus, when oil is only at 70? So maybe we can just touch on that again.
Yeah, really critical. And by the way, the Canadian oil is 50. So in part, our number one export is oil in terms of value. And when you depreciate it by as much as a third, you tend to see the Canadian dollar losing ground. Really critical people understand this. Since 1984, and there was a federal election on this, we as a country decided that we wanted to pay for, and receive international prices for all of our commodities, like energy, like diesel, like gasoline, like oil. The fact that in the past, when we had $100 oil, the Canadian dollar traded on par with the international benchmark, which was the US greenback, meant that we were shielded from these higher prices. Yes, we would get higher oil prices, but the offset was that the Canadian dollar would rise and fall in conjunction. This time it didn't happen. Oil is heading up, and the Canadian dollar is diminishing in value versus the US greenback, to the point, Jackie, where today, unlike back in 2008, unlike 2012 and 13, we're actually losing about 15 to 16 cents a liter in purchasing power because the loonie is not able to respond to the therapy of higher oil prices the rest of the world is getting, but not Canada. And let me be very blunt. Blocking pipelines has a cost. It's 15 cents a liter for most Canadians today.
Well, it's interesting. There have been some economists who have talked about, and you were talking about the Trans Mountain, the expansion pipeline, and talking about how there could be added costs because of that expansion.
Yeah, that's false.
Placed on the.
There are tolls for that, and tolls. I know you have one economist who obviously doesn't even believe that we bring gasoline into the United States into Canada from the United States. The toll will be about, and I'm going to take that economist because it's one, that will be about 3.7 cents a liter. Now you have to understand that in Edmonton, where all the big refinery complexes are, the average price, wholesale price for gasoline is 18 cents a liter less than it is in Vancouver. So even if you put a toll on that, and you bring back to 14 cents, there'd be a net savings potentially of as much as 14 cents a liter for every motorist in Vancouver. Really important to understand that the idea of pipelines not somehow being an important part, an integral part of being able to ship our products to the world market is one of the most damaging reasons to the Canadian economy.
Well, it does seem like the sort of economic argument behind getting more oil in the global market would, you'd see oil prices potentially go lower. I don't know if we'd be a drop in the bucket perhaps, I'm not sure. I think hopefully our producer Cheryl, who's working on this with us, she might be able to link though just to the Q&A that the economist that you're referring to, Rob and Alan did, just so that our viewers can just take a look at both. But we also have lots of more comments coming in. We've got Mike Bossy, Sharam, Matt, Chris, Jenny, Tyler, lots of good stuff. So let's go to Mike Bossy, and Mike Bossy asks, how much income does the federal government earn on gas tax? Do you happen to have that in your back pocket?
Well, the federal government picks up 5% GST on all sales. So as it goes up, of course, that rises. It also picks up 10 cents on every liter of gasoline. There are 45 billion liters of gasoline sold in Canada. So at 10 cents, you're picking up $4.5 billion. Unless my math is a little off. You're also probably picking up a third of that on the HST. So it's not a bad time to be in the business of taxing fuel, and that's just gasoline. Diesel is about another 13 billion liters is sold every year, and the government's also picking up on that. Now, some of that is remitted, depending if you have a business or not, but it certainly helps balance the books.
Dan McTeague is with GasBuddy.com, and we are taking your questions today on gas prices. We've been seeing gas prices climbing across the country, but also taking your comments as to how this is changing your life for you. And from Sharam Arzali, Sharam is saying, we have canceled our road trip to BC. We should have gone last year, Sharam says. And when gas prices were significantly lower last year compared to about
27 cents if you're in Vancouver.
Right.
24 for the rest of the province.
Yeah.
And it's true of the rest of the country at $1.35 average compared to $1.09 last year.
Matt Thomas asks, why does our gas price go up and the oil barrel is not moving up as fast? So not seeing oil prices go up at the same speed as we're seeing gas prices, or the same rate.
So Jackie, when I developed this process of predicting gas prices accurately 15, 20 years ago, I had to look at other factors. You put gasoline in your tank, and you also have to be mindful of the Canadian dollar, which we've talked about. Important to know that those two markets can become detached. Oil can stay where it is, but if gasoline prices on the futures market, it has its own market, goes up because of supply and demand fundamentals, then you're in a very different world, and that can lead to circumstances where oil doesn't move, drops, and gasoline goes the other way. And we see more of that due to summertime driving demand in the summer period from pretty much now, the May 2-4 weekend, all the way to about the second week of September. There are other factors. Last summer, we saw a major spike of about 18 cents a liter. Many people may have forgotten that, especially in Eastern Canada, because of Hurricane Harvey. So there's an example. Oil didn't move, but gasoline certainly did.
Right. Refinery impact.
Exactly. 25%, a quarter of all U.S. gasoline production was offline for a period of about a week and a half.
I also am getting a delayed message from our producer saying that she can hear us just fine. So sorry for the commotion there, that I was thinking you could hear everything, but our mics are actually better than I was expecting. So let's go to Jenny Cahoot. Jenny says, why are there different prices for gas at different locations in the same residential areas? One gas station is much lower than the one down the street.
Yeah. So excellent point. There's no real competition on the price side when it comes to refining. The taxes remain the same except for the up and down 13%, or if you're in Ontario, if you're east of Ontario, 5%, west of Ontario, 5%, east of Ontario, 14 and 15%. The only difference is the retail margin. Everybody today in Ontario, most gas stations are paying about $1.25 to buy their fuel. So the difference between $1.25 and the $1.38 that we're seeing at the high end, or as low as $1.25 in some places, is what retailers charge. Now, many of them are charging zero. They're using gasoline as a loss leader.
Right,
the old
just
classic
to get
example.
you in.
Get in the store to buy some bread or pop or whatever the case may be.
Right, but if you're sort of a standalone gas station, then you're relying on that margin in order to.
Yeah, this doesn't happen in the United States. You can't run a business unless a big box store comes in, and big box stores obviously you have to make up the loss some other way.
We have lots more coming in. Thank you so much for sending your comments and questions. I see Tyler, Jim, Jennifer, Ravi, Arnold, Kirk. So let's try to get to all of you. We are talking about gas prices and why they're so high across the country. But Tyler Temple is asking, why is it that diesel is matching gas prices when it is, he says, 10 times cheaper to refine? I'm not sure about the cost there.
Yeah, that's probably a little exaggerated. It depends on who can refine it. By the way, you hear of the shale revolution in the United States?
Yes.
A lot of the oil that they're producing cannot be turned into diesel. It's not thick enough. Doesn't have the properties that our Canadian heavy oil does, which is why Americans are clamoring for Canadian heavy oil from Alberta. I know it may surprise some people, maybe even shocking. One of the biggest jurisdictions in the world asking for Canadian heavy oil, California. So the reality is that for diesel, which tends to go down at this time of year, it follows really the temperature. Diesel's prices are always inverse to the temperature. Higher temperatures, lower diesel. Colder temperatures, higher diesel, because it's also a proxy not just for jet fuel, but for home heating fuel across the rest of the country, and certainly in the U.S. Northeast. We're not seeing that this year. The U.S. and Canada are exporting significant amounts of diesel to other parts of the world, Latin America in particular. So it's global demand now that we're looking at that's driving these prices, not so much what we're doing here domestically.
We've got an interesting question from Jim Somerville as well here, asking why are taxes done as a percentage? As prices rise, governments rake in more. Why aren't they done as flat amounts instead? And it's a good question, Jim, that we should probably ask them. But it is one of those. I did a lot of work on that. Yeah. It's one of those.
Which is why I got the rebates. But yeah, it's a tax on tax, and it's when the price goes up, it tends to go higher, and governments' coffers tend to increase. So it's certainly a question. It's been debated since 1989 to 1991, the introduction of the GST.
It's really interesting. Jennifer Hopkins is talking again about refiners. So Jennifer's saying more refiners will not generally change the price at the pump. We do not control the price of oil. We do not control the price we are given. Pardon me. So she's pointing out, that she's challenging what we're saying. She's saying, please do some research, Jennifer says. But more refiners will not generally change the price at the pump. We do not control the price of oil. We do not control the price we are given.
I'm not sure what she means by research, but if she's asking the question, which I've repeated 1,000 times in my lifetime, which is we're price takers, we're not price makers. We can have as much gasoline here, even if we were to sell it to other jurisdictions. We price into those three markets that I mentioned earlier, Pacific Northwest out of Oregon, out of Portland, Oregon. Mm-hmm. That's the first benchmark. The second one, of course, is Chicago spot market off the CME. That determines all the prices for the Canadian, from Thunder Bay all the way to the BC interior. And finally, the New York Harbor price, both for RBOB, which is the unleaded gasoline brand that we use here, RVP9, which is of course the summer spec that we're using.
Yeah, if Jennifer, if you wanted to clarify just that question a little bit more, then maybe we'll get a chance to get back to you. I know we might be running out of time, so if you have any questions, please squeeze them in now. Ravi Mahara asks, what percentage of Canadian oil is refined for usage in Canada? Because we do have refineries in Canada that are refining oil. So how can you illustrate that for Ravi?
Yeah, so refineries there's a small refinery in Vancouver. It would use a combination of Canadian oil, almost all of it exclusively, from the Trans Mountain Pipeline. All of the Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba oil is used in those provinces. To a large extent, almost all of it Ontario, and I think the Ontario Energy Board would confirm this. Most of the oil that we use in our three Sarnia refineries and the one refinery we have in Nanticoke come from Alberta. Montreal has one refinery left. It's now, because of the reversal of Line 9 done under the previous government, it's now processing Alberta oil. It's only when you get to Valero in Quebec City, Irving in St. John, New Brunswick, and the Come By Chance refinery that you're using foreign oil.
We have actually a lot more questions coming through, so I'm gonna try to get just a couple quickly here for you. So Arnold Lenseling. Arnold asks, I'm in Regina. When do you think the prices will go down there?
Yeah, I think 3 cents, likely when the two refineries in Edmonton come back online.
Okay. Michelle Gardiner asking, just on the pardon me, I said I'd go so fast. Yeah. That's planned maintenance though, right? I think it's one of the questions where people are like, well, if they planned for that, why haven't they planned for, to stockpile more perhaps? That would make this easier?
Very good question, but remember, we're also influenced by south of the border. Immediately south of the border, the demand for gasoline continues to rise. So we plan for that. We know that there's an impact, and however long it takes for those refineries to come back online does in fact cost us. So they have to go through this process, not every year, but mostly these things take 2 to 4 weeks. And in fact, you can save a bit of time doing that. But if there's other unforeseen events that take place, it's not in their interest to keep those refineries down. They want to take advantage of these high prices as well.
We have just a few more comments coming in right now, but you know what? I think that we might just go with this one from Michelle Gardner. We've been talking about gas prices today, but as some of our viewers do tune in at all sorts of times along the way, and so Michelle Gardner asks, just joining, but what honestly determines prices? So a good place to end where we started. If it's a supply issue, it's because oil prices have dropped, yet when prices rise, they rise at the pumps too. So maybe we can just sort of end with the summing up, what is it that really drives prices when we see them at, go to these sort of levels, these sort of, 2014 levels, record sort of levels.
Oil is the big reason. OPEC has got its act together. It's restricted the amount of oil. The U.S. can't make up the difference. Canada can't make up the difference because of our pipeline problems. So we're really stuck in a situation where the balance between supply and demand in the world has come very much into focus. Last week's decision by the Trump administration to potentially block 1 million barrels of oil in Iran. There's a number of really a lot of play here, a lot of moving parts that go into the price structure. You have to look at oil, you have to look at gasoline, you have to look at the Canadian dollar, and you have to look at those ad valorem taxes of between 5 and 15% across Canada.
And then we need to figure out, our creative ways to deal with the high gas prices when they do happen. If you have more of those solutions, put them in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in across all of our Facebook page, and to all of our commenters: Michelle, Arnold, Ravi, Jennifer, Jim, Tyler, Jenny, Matt, Sharam, Mike. The list goes on. So thank you so much for tuning in and for engaging with us today. Again, this is Dan McTeague. He's from GasBuddy.com, and I'm sure we will be back again with another Facebook Live soon, so thank you very much. It's interesting, that it's a conversation that